Here are the greatest moments from my 5.5-hour review of Mark Douglas's workshop, How to Think Like a Professional Trader.
Stop thinking! There's nothing to think about. Got that? Well, the reality is there isn't any reason you're going to be able to come up with that's going to assure you of anything. Unless the reason you're coming up with is you know the people who are actually going to bid the market up or offer it lower, and they tell you what they're going to do and why. Well, yeah, you got to go with the flow. The trend is your friend. Cut your losses, let your profits run. You know, there's all these neat little phrases, but it's like, who in the hell knew what that meant and how to do it? It is the primary skill that you will have to acquire to create consistency, to trade without fear. No other skills needed other than the actual physical ability to put your finger on the mouse button and click in the buy or the sell, and you can find yourself in a winning trade. You can find yourself in a spectacularly winning trade, far beyond what you could have ever imagined. So I'm saying that if you make up your mind to trade for a new reason, the reason is the acquisition of skills as opposed to the outcome or how much money you're making, you will acquire those skills, and then you'll find that the outcomes just take care of themselves. You're just building skills. If you get your mind out of the money, out of the outcome part, and focus on building the skills, once those skills are there, you're going to make all the money you want. The most successful traders love the process of trading, whereas a typical trader usually ignores the process because he's obsessively focused on the outcome. What I've been working with him, what I noticed is that he was able to stay focused really for not more than about an hour a day. But if he really wanted to make consistent money, then I felt that an hour a day was about it. Because after an hour a day, he'd start losing, his focus would start to diminish, and then he'd also start to get reckless.
Decision fatigue refers to the deteriorating quality of decisions made by an individual after a long day, and after doing something mentally intensive. And trading is certainly intensive. Not everybody is capable of maintaining the ability to make logical decisions for several hours. If you are currently trading and have a trade log, you can actually check to see if there is a correlation between the time of day and your P&L.
So you really have to be focused.
This topic deserves its own video, but multitasking is something that is very misunderstood. You can't watch a show and write a paper at the same time, and this applies to any other activity that requires concentration. You and I can hold a conversation with each other and tie our shoes at the same time. Why? Because we have tied our shoes so many times that it has become an unconscious process. We can do it automatically without devoting any mental energy to it.
And to trade without fear, you're going to have to learn how to think in probabilities.
We don't learn how to stop feeling. We learn how to not let our emotions cloud our judgment. We change the way we react to how we feel. We do not remove the way we feel.
We're going to set aside or move from thinking in a trade-by-trade mentality. In other words, what this trade is going to do for me right now, am I right or wrong on this trade? And we're going to move to a series of trades perspective.
The individual trade isn't as important as the end result of all those trades combined.
The market is not a good arena to be doing this, by the way. Okay, this is not a good area to be working these kind of emotional issues out. Go ahead. Learning to trade without fear, hesitation, or internal conflicts is a function of believing that you don't have to know what's going to happen next on a trade-by-trade basis to win or make consistent money. If you don't predefine the risk in advance, you're operating out of the mindset that you think you know what's going to happen next. We got a real problem here because our minds are naturally wired to associate. In other words, our minds will automatically make connections.
Yes, our brains seek patterns in everything. We look for correlations, connections, and other things that help us make sense of the world. Have you noticed that you barely ever see really old people who are really tall?
The accumulated, got that?
Trading would be very difficult for people with low self-esteem if those people are associating the result of each trade with the perception of themselves.
Thinking, assuming, or believing you know what will happen next creates an unrealistic expectation in a specific outcome.
We don't know which trades will work, but to a certain degree, we can assume the overall results of 100 trades. That's why we need to lower the emphasis on individual trade results.
Because if I start gathering evidence as to why it might not work, then I might talk myself out of taking the trade. And then if I end up talking myself out of taking the trade and it turns out to be a winner, I'll probably be in more emotional pain than what I would have been in had I taken the trade and it turned out to be a loser. But
there's a big difference between intuition and what we hope will happen. We're in a different world than when this workshop was done, but it's still just people making price move, and understanding people and institutions is still important.
Just see what we got here, okay? Price movement is always the result of an imbalance. When you consider the diversity of the market, with all the different players and all the different agendas from people all over the world, trying to predict what will happen next would be almost equivalent to sitting in front of a slot machine and coming up with some rational reason why you think that the pattern that you're looking for is going to come up on the next push of the button.
It's easy to say vague things about what we need to do, but Mark does an amazing job at giving us an example of how to think in probabilities. He is saying that we don't need to know what's going to happen next. We don't need to be able to rationally explain our position. I'm not going to pretend like I know what's going to happen. The only thing I can do to be a good trader with no intuition is to have good risk management and to keep my emotions under control.
Is because when we put on a trade, we put on a trade for a reason. See, reasons are important in our lives. Reasons are important. And see, the problem is that when the trade works, we just naturally think our reason was right. What I'm trying to do here is help you disconnect any reason that you put on a trade with the reason why it actually moved. Because like I said before, there's almost never a relationship. There's almost never a correlation. And so the next time that reason seems to appear in the market, we're gonna do the same thing, thinking we'll get the same result. And then when we don't, we feel betrayed. And then the next time the reason comes up, we're going to be a little hesitant. We might not put it on at all. We'll try to find additional reasons why this trade will work. When the reality is there isn't any reason you're going to be able to come up with that's going to assure you of anything. Unless the reason you're coming up with is you know the people who are actually going to bid the market up or offer it lower, and they tell you what they're going to do and why. If you think you know, you're just making it up.
Unless you're actually talking to the traders, the dynamic traders that are making price move, there's no way of actually predicting and knowing what price action will do. And we can use that realization to remove the emotional attachment to each trade.
Fear has an effect on the way we perceive information. When we're in a state of mind of fear, we are perceiving information in a threatening way.
The idea of fear affecting our interpretations is spot on. In the woods at night, you're on edge, and you hear a stick crack next to you. You might think, bear! Fear affects the way we think. Thinking affects our emotions. Emotions affect our behaviors. This is the cognitive triangle, which is all about how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors all affect each other, can cause each other, and so on and so forth.
You guys with me on this? If the desire is there, you'll find a way to facilitate the change.
Yes!
And that's the big one. I don't need to know what's going to happen next to make money. Start monitoring your thoughts, your words, or your actions to see that they're consistent with what it is that you want to accomplish. And then simply, purposefully refocus when you find out that you're saying, doing, or thinking something that's opposite or not consistent with what you desire. Math formulas or price patterns don't know the intentions, objectives, or reasons why the individual traders who are capable of moving prices behave the way they do. As a result, you will almost never know the real reason why any particular trade worked or not.
What he just said is one of my personal biggest takeaways from this entire workshop. For me, it kind of removes some of the pressure.
Our minds are literally wired to connect the two. Disconnect this now moment from what happened the last time. Because there is no connection. The reality is there's no connection. That's the truth. Those 5 fundamental truths are anything can happen. Is that true or not?
Yes, Mr. Douglas.
Every moment is unique. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. An edge is nothing more than an indication of a higher probability of one thing happening over another. Okay.
Yes.
Is there a random distribution between wins and losses on any given set of variables that define an edge? Yes, absolutely. Do we need to know what's going to happen next to produce a consistent income?
No.
No. What most people don't realize is that trading without fear is actually a learned trading skill.
Absolutely. In psychology and in therapy, the way to overcome fear is through systematic desensitization, which is the fancy way of saying that we have to expose ourselves to that which we fear. Mark tells his story about an extremely painful trade where he exited a position for a loss 30 minutes before the price quadrupled. Then we get this guy.
You said you had 5 contracts?
No, 2.
Two.
Just
Why
2.
don't you just take one off the table, let the other one run for another day?
First of all, Jerry, you're assuming that I knew that this was going to happen.
I love his response. I think that most traders have become more familiar with the common cognitive biases, so you don't really see people saying stuff like, "Why didn't you just blah blah blah?" Our brains make it seem like events in the past were easily predictable or preventable when they were not.